Good morning to the cult of Tony Khan. My name is Christian, back with Duality of Wrestling. Thanks as always for checking out the channel and the podcast as a whole. We appreciate you being here. Now, I wanted to do both a quick recap of the Continental Challenge Cup to see how we got here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the blind draw that's recently been completed because we now have the quarterfinals set for the Continental Cup. 2 matches on Dynamite this week, followed by 2 matches on Collision that will take us into the semifinals in Scotland before we get to the finals at All In Wembley itself. But since we're gonna jump into the Continental Cup and see where we are, I figured we would take a minute to see how we got there. We started off by Ace Austin losing to Claudio Castagnoli, and that allowed Claudio to move on to the next round, as did his fellow Death Rider compatriot, Jon Moxley, as he defeated Jungle Jack Perry. It was a very competitive match that was really good for the development of Jack Perry's character going forward and kind of predicts where he might go moving forward, which is interesting. We had Orange Cassidy defeating Matt Sydal and punching his ticket to the quarterfinals. And then in the final of the first bucket of first round matches, we saw Eddie Kingston defeat Jake Doyle of the Don Callis family to advance. That brings us to sort of the second bucket of matches for the Continental Cup first round. We had Hechicero defeat Brian Cage. We had Kyle O'Reilly defeat Roderick Strong. We had Nigel McGuinness, barring an injury, advance by defeating Katsuyori Shibata. And we had Jay White of the Bang Bang Gang defeat David Finlay to advance. So that brings us to the 8 men in the quarterfinals. That is Nigel McGuinness, Jon Moxley, Eddie Kingston, Orange Cassidy, Claudio Castagnoli, Kyle O'Reilly, Hechicero, and Jay White. Those are your 8 quarterfinalists. And we now have the complete blind draw done, so we know what these quarterfinal matches are and when they're going to take place. So let's jump in and talk about it. The first match to take place of 2 this week on Dynamite, August 19th, will be Nigel McGuinness versus Hechicero, and this is a match with a huge question mark over it. If you watched the Nigel McGuinness versus Katsuyori Shibata match, which, by the way, I highly recommend you do. That match is such a great exercise in how good technical wrestling, especially technical wrestling with an international flair that both McGuinness and Shibata bring, is really, really fun to watch, especially as a change of pace from the typical fare we get in AEW and pro wrestling in the States as a whole. So, highly recommend that match. It has been come out and reported ever since then that Nigel McGuinness did suffer an injury in that match, and his status for the rest of the tournament is a little bit in question. I think we're going to get most of our clarity on that when Dynamite kicks off this week. If he is able to go on, obviously this match will take place, and if it does, I fully expect Nigel McGuinness to win and advance to the semifinals in Scotland. If it doesn't, it's very possible that we could get either an injury angle or a office-based replacement, if you will, as in like an executive order replacement that replaces Nigel in that match. This is all going to hang on the severity of how hurt is Nigel McGuinness and how much is he able to push through that injury. So I think it's very telling that they did announce this match, considering they could have easily, they acknowledged Nigel's injury already on TV. They could have very easily pulled Nigel and put somebody else in the match against Hechicero or rework the draw to however, make it make sense for the replacement. They didn't do that. They pushed forward with Nigel. So to me, again, barring an unforeseen angle, I think this is going to be something that Nigel is going to grit his teeth and push through as much as his body will permit. And to me, that makes me think Nigel McGuinness is definitely going to win this match. So I've got Nigel winning here on Dynamite and moving on to the semis in Scotland. Now, the other matchup that's going to take place on Dynamite is shocking to me because this is a match I could have easily seen happening in the finals, and I almost think it was my pick to see happen in the finals. So it happening on Dynamite is very, very surprising to me. Jon Moxley, the current Continental Champion, will be taking on the leader of the Bang Bang Gang, Jay White. This is stunning. Jay White to me was my favorite to reach the finals of the main contenders, being Nigel McGuinness himself, Eddie Kingston, and Kyle O'Reilly. Jay White is obviously somebody they have a lot of faith in. He's been booked very prominently. He's even main evented an AEW pay-per-view for the World Championship in the past. So I would not have been surprised if they had done a means to get him versus Mox again, especially given the ongoing Death Riders, Dogs, Bang Bang Gang beef that's happening. It would make sense from a storyline perspective, which again makes sense that it's happening at all. So there is absolutely a creative reason this match is occurring. I'm just surprised we are getting it now. I thought at worst we get it in the semis, but I really, if you had to ask me to bet what my finals would have been, it probably would have been, especially after Nigel's injury, I would have easily bet it would have been Jay White versus Mox. So we're going to get this match on Dynamite. I am super interested to see where it goes. I do not expect Jay White to win because Jon Moxley to me feels like a lock for the finals. I don't see any other reason to have Moxley defend the title within the tournament format unless you're taking him to the finals. If you wanted somebody else to win the tournament or reach the finals without it being Mox, you have the cup be something that grants you a shot at Moxley's championship rather than the title being defended within the structure of the tournament itself. So to me, Mox is a lock. I guess the only knock I can see on Jay White, outside of the fact that he hasn't really knocked my socks off since he's been back, is that they might be a little bit hesitant about Jay White's significant injury history. Obviously, White was out for a very long time dealing with the injuries that he had suffered previously. I believe it was well over a year, almost approaching a year and a half. So I can understand the hesitation, and I'm just a little bit surprised. I definitely thought this was one of the marquee matchups that were possible as a result of this bracket. So a little bit, eyebrow raising to me that Moxley and White is occurring here. I do expect Jon Moxley to fully win this match and move on to the semis as well. So that leaves us with the two matches on Collision, and both of these are interesting for very different reasons. The first we're going to have is, once again, the conglomeration explodes, where Kyle O'Reilly will face another conglomeration member after he defeated Roddy Strong in the first round, and Orange Cassidy will be his opponent. So we have two conglomeration members squaring off, and the fact that they're doing this twice in a row makes a statement to me. They don't have to be putting Kyle up against Conglomero members twice consecutively. So the fact that they are makes me think that they are working to branching Kyle out from the conglomeration. And you could very easily and rightfully say, Christian, isn't this just wishful thinking on your part? You've said multiple times you think Kyle O'Reilly is better outside of the confines of the conglomeration, and maybe this is just you trying to will it into existence. Maybe. That's certainly possible. I maybe'd it so hard I hit the mic. That's how much of a maybe it is. But I do think there's very much a possibility that creatively the reason you keep putting O'Reilly against the people he is aligned with is to sow the seeds for him to not be aligned with them in the future. Otherwise, why keep doing it? They could have put O'Reilly against Hechicero and Orange Cassidy against Nigel McGuinness, and nobody would have batted an eye. Or they could have reworked the brackets any number of ways. But the fact that they're choosing to do this right on the heels of doing it previously says to me that they have a different vision in mind for the future of Kyle O'Reilly. And to me, that is making him a bit more serious, potentially reigniting the Moxley feud. But either way, I don't think Kyle O'Reilly is long for the conglomeration. It's possible that a loss in this tournament might be what spirals him a little bit, but I do think this is very much sowing the seeds for Kyle to evolve out from where he is currently, and be more of the serious, violent artist character he's been in the past. So, as far as the victor, I do think Kyle O'Reilly wins in this case. I don't think there's any reason otherwise to have him face off against this. Again, there's no reason to have him do this twice in a row unless he's going to win. Otherwise, why not have him lose in the first round, have it be Roddy Strong versus Orange Cassidy, especially since both Roddy and Orange are both former international champions. Kyle O'Reilly has never held a singles championship in AEW, so it would make a little bit more sense from a resume and prestige perspective to do Orange versus Roddy. But since Kyle O'Reilly advanced, that makes me think he is also a lock to advance, and it is very possible he goes up against Moxley in the semifinals. So I'm going to pick Kyle O'Reilly here. I think that's the only decision that makes sense given the booking and given the placement. Orange Cassidy can easily absorb the loss. He is a prominent member of the AEW roster, whereas O'Reilly, I think, needs the win more. So give me Kyle O'Reilly here. And then lastly, we have a built in feud with a ton of history that should be so fun to watch from just the real animosity potentially spilling out into the ring perspective. You've got Eddie Kingston taking on the Death Riders Claudio Castagnoli. There is a massive, massive back history here between these two, dating all the way back to Shikara. So, and that's pre when Claudio signed with WWE. So he has had beef with Eddie for a long time. Um, I we've seen Eddie come out in gear that mocked Claudio multiple times. We've seen even when they've shook hands that Eddie and Claudio both kind of looked disgusted after doing it for the Ring of Honor World Championship. There's legitimate animosity here. Whether or not it's been put to bed is another story, but there certainly is a lot of real life tension here that has existed in the past. And Eddie Kingston is never one to shy away from leaning into bringing real life tension into his professional wrestling feuds. Seen him do it with Claudio specifically before. We've seen him do it with CM Punk. We've seen him do it numerous times in the past. So I don't think we're going to see any kind of. We've seen it with Bryan Danielson. So I don't think we're going to see anything less than that here. This match is going to be a fun brawl. Claudio is probably going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of carrying in this match because he is the better pro wrestler of the two, and I think he is the stronger overall competitor of the two. I don't think that's much of a leap to say. That said, I don't see Claudio advancing here. Obviously, again, if you're asking me to pick the better talent in the ring, I'm going to go with Claudio. I think the better character for a TV show is Eddie Kingston. The only thing that gives me a little bit of pause is the fact that, again, Eddie Kingston has not been booked super prominently on AEW main roster TV prior to the tournament. Prior to that, he was mostly teaming with Ortiz in Ring of Honor. So the idea that he is now going to get a significant boost from this tournament in almost a flash fashion feels a little bit uncomfortable to say, like, maybe the ground is not as solid underfoot as one might think, but he also has a ton of history with Mox in AEW. They have feuded before. I believe, over the AEW World Championship. They have been partners on multiple occasions and challenged for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. So there is a lot of history between the two, which is what put him as a dark horse for me to win the tournament at the outset. So I've got him going over here. Claudio does not need the win. Eddie Kingston definitely does. And there's more creative possibilities and intriguing things that can occur with Eddie Kingston winning more than with Claudio. Yes, you could argue that Claudio winning could lead to the Death Rider, mutiny that I've been espousing for about a year at this point. If I was to have that happen, it would be the Pac being the one overthrowing Moxley versus Claudio. I don't think Claudio specifically has the character or the promo game to carry being the lead member of a faction. So I don't see that really working out in this instance, and I think they'll save that for potentially after Mox fails to take the championship from Will Ospreay down the line. So to me, this is Eddie Kingston's match. I've got him winning here. So that would put us at a semifinal roster of Nigel McGuinness, again, health, not barring health. Jon Moxley, Continental Champion, makes sense. Kyle O'Reilly, history with Moxley. Eddie Kingston, history with Moxley. There's a lot of combinations here, and that actually would keep all of my 3 out of my 4 predictions for the finals making it there. Jay White would be the obvious omission because he can't make it there unless he defeats Moxley, which I do not believe that he will. So that, to me, is what our semifinals will likely look like. But this is how our quarterfinals shake out. Nigel versus Hechicero, barring injury for Nigel. Mox versus Jay. Eddie Kingston versus Claudio. And Orange Cassidy versus Kyle O'Reilly. Let me know in the comments what you think, how you felt about the first round, and what do you see going down in the second round? Who do you have going on, and what matches are you most looking forward to? Thanks again for watching Duality of Wrestling. I will be back a bit later with my overall Dynamite preview, where I'll touch on the Dynamite matches for the Cup, as well as some of the other stuff that's been announced for Dynamite. So I will be back shortly with that. Until then, have a good one, guys.